Day 34, verses 41 to 43, The Scattered Mind. Namaste and welcome to Gita 360. Having previously introduced a way of acting that brings clarity, Krishna shows in verses 41 to 43 why that clarity is simple to understand but tough to live with. The challenge is not in understanding what is right, but in remaining steady within that understanding. O descendant of the Kurus, the intellect of those who are on this path is resolute, and their aim is one directional. But the intellect of those who are irresolute is many branched. Krishna draws a clear contrast between two states of mind, the focused and the unsteady. The focused mind is driven by a resolute intellect, and because of that clarity, it is able to move in a single direction without being constantly pulled away. In contrast, an unsteady mind lacks direction. It keeps moving between desires and possibilities. Each new thought or attraction creates another path, and the mind begins to disperse its energy across too many directions. When the mind is clear about what matters, it does not need to keep reconsidering every step. There is a sense of inner alignment that guides action. But when that clarity is missing, the mind begins to branch out endlessly without settling anywhere. This scattered movement is not always obvious. It can appear as overthinking, indecision, or the constant search for better alternatives. But underneath it lies a lack of inner steadiness. The difference is not in how much the mind can process, but in how firmly it is anchored. When there is clarity, the mind gathers itself. When there is no clarity, it keeps dividing itself. And over time, this difference shapes how we act. A steady mind moves forward, even if slowly. A scattered mind keeps moving, but often without arriving anywhere. O Parth, those with limited understanding are attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas, which advocate various rituals for elevation to the celestial planets, birth in prosperous families, power, and enjoyment. They argue that there is nothing beyond this. Krishna talks about a specific kind of distraction, being drawn towards ideas that sound appealing and promising on the surface. The phrase flowery words is important here. It refers to teachings or messages that emphasize reward, success, and desirable outcomes, often in attractive and convincing ways. When the mind is not steady, it is naturally drawn to what promises comfort, gain, or elevation. These can feel meaningful because they align with what we already desire. Over time, this creates a subtle narrowing of perspective. The mind begins to believe that these rewards are the ultimate goal and that there is nothing beyond them. This is where clarity begins to weaken. Instead of looking deeper, the mind becomes satisfied with what appears attractive and achievable. It starts to organize action around outcomes rather than understanding. It starts to become outward focused, and a mind that is constantly looking outward finds it difficult to settle within. They glorify only those portions of the Vedas that please their senses and perform pompous, ritualistic ceremonies for attaining high birth, opulence, sensual enjoyment, and elevation to the heavenly planets. Krishna completes this idea by showing where this scattered attention leads. When the mind is absorbed in promises of reward and benefit, it begins to organize itself around desire. Action is no longer guided by clarity, but by what can be gained from it. This creates a pattern. The mind starts seeking results, better outcomes, more comfort, greater success. It becomes increasingly occupied with what lies ahead rather than what is being done in the present. Actions multiply not because they are necessary, but because each one is tied to a desired result. This does not necessarily bring satisfaction. Instead, it creates a cycle of constant wanting. One desire leads to another, and the mind remains engaged in pursuing outcomes rather than understanding itself. Over time, this leads to a kind of inner restlessness. In our lives, this scattered state of mind shows up in subtle ways. We move from one task to another without fully settling into any of them. We constantly check, compare, reconsider, and question our choices. At times, it feels like we are being productive, but underneath there is a lack of direction. The mind is busy, but not necessarily clear. This often happens when we are driven by multiple expectations: what we want, what others expect, what seems appealing in the moment. Each of these pulls us in a different direction. When we begin to simplify our focus even slightly, something changes. There is a sense of moving in one direction, of being clear in our thoughts and actions. As human beings, our intellect possesses the ability to control the mind. We must cultivate the intellect and use it to guide the mind in the proper direction. Buddhi Yoga is the art of detaching the mind from the outcomes of actions by developing a resolute intellect. Thought of the day. Take a moment to notice your mind today and reflect. Where is my attention scattered right now? Am I being pulled by multiple desires or expectations at once? What would it feel like to stay with one direction, even if it is not perfect? Thank you for joining me on Gita 360. May you find steadiness within, allowing your mind to move with clarity instead of being pulled in many directions.